So we're going to talk about 20 things that you might find shocking and you probably didn't know about your personality, and why mastering them is probably the most important thing that you're ever going to do. So let's get started. I do want to point out that for every one of these, I'm going to have supportive information. So you can see there's a study behind each one of these things, and it's not just my opinion, but these are actually facts that have been documented over many years by several different studies, although we're going to show just a few of these right here. The first one is that you have 5 core personality traits, and everybody does. Now, some people know this, but not a lot of people. Most people are more familiar with like Myers-Briggs and these different types of personality tests. But the most important or effective one from at least a scientific perspective happens to be the Big 5, also understood as OCEAN. Openness to experience, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, also known as emotional stability. These go far back, but your personality, while it could be made up of 18,000 different potential personality traits, has been narrowed down to 5 most important ones that are the greatest predictors for things like career and relationship success, besides other things. So why do you need to master your personality? Well, if you want to have success and even, in fact, happiness in life. The number 2 thing is that you're not a type, not like the Myers-Briggs. See, Myers-Briggs says that you are either introverted or you are extroverted, that type of thing. But in reality, you're on a spectrum. You have a certain amount of introversion, or I should say a certain amount of extraversion. You have a certain amount of conscientiousness, like orderliness or dutifulness and following through on things that you're going to do. You have a certain amount of agreeability. You're not either disagreeable or agreeable. You're more or less disagreeable. And where do you land in that? So this is an essential thing. And these patterns that you have for optimizing your personality actually reflect whether or not you're going to have a happy and fulfilled life. So what happens when you think about this as a type, not as a type, but as a spectrum? It means that you can move that spectrum a little bit. The third thing is your happiness is more about your personality than your circumstances. This is very true. People always say it's not your circumstances, it's what you do with them. It's not what happens to you do, it's the way you look at it, it's your attitude about it. Those things are true, but they are centered upon what happens in your personality. And you might just think, well, I am just that way. We'll get to that. Are you really just that way? Well, the fourth thing is that most failures in life are actually personality failures. That's hard for us to understand. But if you make financial decisions that are bad, it's because the decision-making portion of your personality, which is actually a significant part of it, by the way, is off. It's underdeveloped. And that needs to be developed. It might be that you're not responsible enough to get things done. This also, under the banner of conscientiousness, is something that you can develop. You can build the habits toward it. You might be too open-minded, therefore you're flighty about things and you don't take things seriously. Or you might be too closed-minded to actually see what's good in life or what opportunities are in front of you. You might be so agreeable that you get mowed over, or not agreeable enough and that nobody wants to be around you and you can't actually build rapport with others. You might have too much neuroticism, so you have anxiety and depression and doubt and fears all over the place. Whereas if you have this under control, you're going to do much better. And that's what determines your happiness. Your circumstances matter, but your personality will drive you into most of the circumstances you're in. Not all. There's tragedy that happens to people, but your personality also helps you deal with those things. The fifth thing is your personality is not fixed, but it is patterned. See, change is possible, and you need to train your personality like a muscle. Over time, there are certain things that naturally change in people's personality, but there are other things that you change more deliberately, which brings me to the 6th point. Now, that's that 50% of your personality is genetic. It's God-given. The other 50%, that's been formed and shaped. Ultimately speaking, it's on you. Sure, your parents affected it, your current experience in life affected it, but what you do with it matters. That first 50% is genetic. It's kind of like height. You didn't make yourself 6'5", but what you do with being 6'5", or 5'11", or 5'2", that's your business. How do you develop that? How do you maximize your athletic prowess or capability according to your height? Do you work hard on it, even though you can't control the 6'5" part, right? So it's essential that we look at this. What does this mean? It means that you can't take somebody that is 50% by way of genetics, more introverted, and make them just want to be around parties all the time and people. That's exhausting to them. Okay, they recharge by going internal. But what you can do is give them the 3 C's: competency, capability, and confidence in extroverted settings. So somebody might need to be in a sales role, even though they're a little bit more introverted, because it's the only job that they could really find, and they had a particular knowledge about something, so they're willing to do it because they have to feed their family. They're not going to really love it, but they can become confident, competent, and comfortable doing it while they need to do it, even though they're going to retract back to that introversion. That's what it means to move further to develop this personality. Now, if most of where you are happens to be because of your personal experience, you can actually change into a person that is actually extroverted because it's not that 50% genetic mode. You might have been maybe afraid or embarrassed or ashamed when you were younger, and you spoke up and you made, comments around people, and that has kind of beaten you down into this place where naturally you want to actually go out there and expand yourself. So that can be changed. Now, you're also not just like this. In fact, this is the worst type of person to ever have in a marriage or to hire. Well, I'm just that way. No, you're not just that way. Okay, you're untrained. Now, you might be naturally inclined to certain things. There are some people naturally inclined to anger, but they're the most peaceful people you've ever met. Why? Because they've optimized their personality. They know what to do with that. There might be certain people that are quite closed-minded to things, but through life, they've learned to be more open-minded, and they receive information that other people would close off beforehand because they've developed this and they've been more effective with it. The eighth thing is that your traits can be trained, and this is what I've been alluding to. In fact, even wired. You can target habits that increase your conscientiousness and reduce things like neuroticism. So, for example, you can literally become more responsible and get more things done in a shorter period of time with less anxiety if you build habits, also known as virtues, in order to become better at those. And that leads us to the ninth point. Your personality is shaped by these habits, especially by the practice of virtue. Now, there's all sorts of studies that show this just in the regular psychological community out there that never actually existed in psychology, that is, until about 25, 30 years ago when Martin Seligman developed positive psychology. And now people are all over it. Harvard University has the flourishing program and whatnot, human flourishing. And so they found that virtue is actually the reason that healthy people behave the way they are, whereas psychology used to just study like neurosis and psychosis. It could tell you how to be unhealthy, but not actually how to be healthy. So this virtue building has really taken a prominent role in psychology, even though those years, although some psychologists still reject it. But what's interesting is that it was around for millennium before that. Aristotle talked about the importance of the cardinal virtues. The word cardinal is the Latin term for hinge, meaning that all other virtues pivot or hinge upon the cardinal virtues. And if you learn them, you can have a life of effectiveness and actually of goodness and of happiness as a result of that. The 10th thing is that introversion is not shyness. A lot of people are shocked by this. It's actually how you recharge. I alluded to this also earlier. Shyness is more fear, whereas introversion is this desire to actually recharge your batteries and not be exhausted when you're in front of a lot of people. The 11th thing is too much openness can actually be a real thing. This is also something I've mentioned before. You chase too many ideas. People say, you need to be open-minded. You're not open-minded. You're closed-minded. They drill that into you as though open-mindedness is a virtue, when in reality, too much of anything can turn it into a vice. You can have an excess of each one of the character traits, or you can have a deficit in each one of them. Either way, it's suboptimal. So you have too much openness, it's going to lead you into kind of silliness. The 12th thing is having too little consciousness, or sometimes too much. So we're going to explain kind of both here. Just like we said with openness, you can have excessive or you can have deficient traits. Each are suboptimal. What does that mean? Well, if you procrastinate and you miss deadlines, you're not going to get anything done, and you need to change that in order to have success. Why do I talk about this? Because conscientiousness is one of the leading indicators to whether or not a person is going to have professional career success. It's also very much tied to relationship success, because when you're in a relationship, there's kind of like a little institution that takes place that has a financial aspect to it, organizational aspect to it, even an inventory aspect to it too. So with a relationship, you have to have a certain amount of conscientiousness in order to be effective, as well as you do in a professional setting. And that runs across all professions when it has to do with a little bit more conscientiousness. The only thing that is more of a leading indicator than that is IQ itself. And but IQ coupled with conscientiousness is where you truly find success. There's a lot of people that have IQ but not conscientiousness, and that diminishes their ability to be successful. So likewise, obviously you could have too much of this. The excess of that trait is going to turn you into a person who's sometimes a workaholic or suffers from analysis paralysis and can't get anything done too. So, or you're too harsh on others that don't work at the same level as you. 13, too much agreeableness. You can lose your voice in trying to keep the peace. And too many people just try to keep the peace and they compromise justice when they're doing that, even justice toward themselves. They walk into a meeting and because they're conscientious and agreeable, they say something like, sure, I can do it. I know you asked me to do it. I've got it. But inside they're saying, no, I can't. I can't actually do that. I don't have time to do it. So now they have to work the weekend to get it done. And there's an injustice that takes place for them and also for other people who maybe could have done that job for them, participated in this. So we can be too agreeable and we lose our voice. The 14th and the 15th things are related, so I'm going to combine them. We mostly know that there's too little extroversion by a lot of people, and they want to have more. They kind of disappear even when they should be leading. But it's tied to number 15, and that is that extroversion is the only trait that people consistently say they wish they had more of. But it can actually be learned. In other words, there's extraversion envy, but there's not too much envy in other things. Most people are like, well, I shouldn't be more open-minded because I'm just the right amount of open-minded. They're too open-minded. Open-minded people are like, well, I don't want to be more open-minded because I'm already perfectly open-minded. So people have this tendency, but interestingly enough, some studies show that as much as 80% of people in the world, no matter where they score on extroversion, wish they had a little bit more of it. So how do you learn it? And is too much too much? Yeah, too much is too much. You talk too much. People don't want to listen. You don't realize that you're just trying to draw attention to yourself as opposed to contribute. So people say, well, how much did you talk? How much did you listen? God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you talk. Wrong. Here's the formula for talking and listening. You should talk as much as you need to talk to be understood and listen as much as you need to be understood. Now, sometimes that means doing all the talking. Sometimes it means doing all the listening. In most cases, it means paying attention to the other person to see whether or not you're talking too much and they need more information or they need more information, you should talk more. Same thing with what they're doing. You balance it out. The 16th thing is that most people score too high on neuroticism, and they don't realize it. This is a very interesting thing. Neuroticism is the one thing that you don't want to score too high on. So people are like, well, how does it work with averages? What if I'm like average in neuroticism? Isn't that okay? I'm not too high? Well, in order for these tests to be scientifically valid, you need to have about 16% of the people scoring really high, 16% of these people scoring low, and then you've got, a whole sense of divergence right here in the middle that equals things out. Yes, meaning that if you're at that 50% mark, you might think, well, that's good. I mean, half the people are more neurotic than me, meaning they have, less emotional stability than I do, and then I've got more than 50%, or right about that. That's pretty good. Well, let's look at it this way. If, let's say we were doing an assessment on a compulsion to grab rattlesnakes, okay, and it was on a spectrum. What is your degree or your compulsion to grab rattlesnakes? Well, clearly, if you're like in the top 1% of people wanting to grab rattlesnakes and you're always grabbing rattlesnakes, that's very bad. But it's also bad if you're at the 50% level because mostly you shouldn't grab rattlesnakes. Now, maybe there's this potential difference in there. If a rattlesnake is climbing on the couch next to your loved one, you're probably going to want to grab the rattlesnake. But frankly speaking, grabbing rattlesnakes to any large degree is negative altogether. That's not entirely true about neuroticism in that we need to have a certain amount of neuroticism just to even have like an emotional experience in life and to have a certain amount of self-conscientiousness and reflection. But scoring even mid-range in that is considered scoring a little higher. You want to be lower on this. Women generally score higher on neuroticism. Don't be a hater, by the way. Oh, you're saying this about women. That's just the studies. It's a scientific fact out there than men, as women also do rate higher generally on agreeability, agreeableness. But it's important that you want to rein in that neuroticism and increase your emotional stability, and there are ways you actually can do that. The 17th thing is that conscientiousness, as we said before, is the number one predictor of career and relationship success. But I didn't mention before, and that's what I'm highlighting here in 17, that's only if it's paired really with low neuroticism. If your neuroticism is super high and you have high conscientiousness, it just leads to a certain amount of additional problems. So it needs to be paired with that. The 18th thing is that your best trait, left untrained, becomes your greatest liability. So if you're super open-minded, but you don't train it, you're going to be excessive. If you're super agreeable, but you don't train it, you're going to be excessive. Same thing with extroversion. So just because you run around saying, well, I'm really great because everybody loves me and I'm really good with people, what you're unaware of is that there's a lot of people out there in the world saying, you know what? Tone it down a little. And if you don't have that self-awareness, it's going to work against you. The 19th thing is that personality tests are mirrors, but most people never train what they see. See, in fact, if you're really effective in taking the big five, you're supposed to have other people take it with you, about you. Most people are like, oh yeah, let's see, do I get angry? No, not at all, total peaceful. But everybody else is around like, no, they're getting angry a lot. You have to be able to take that assessment according to reality. And this is a very, very essential thing in this. And once that reality is in front of you, you have to look at that and not just be happy with it. Most people take a personality test and they go, oh, look, I aced it. I'm amazing. Oh, you flunked it. You're not so cool because your personality isn't like mine. No, there is no perfect personality, but there's an optimal personality. We all know this, that there are people in your life that if you either like them or didn't like them, I really love so-and-so, but, or I can't stand so-and-so because it's always, I wish they were a little bit more, or I wish they were a little bit less. And anybody that knows you well enough or knows me well enough knows that they wish that I was a little bit less or a little bit more of something. And you need to work on it forever. And that's why Vireon exists, our product, which is our optimization program. I'm not trying to sell you right now, but I'm telling you why it exists. See, we're too easy on ourselves when it comes to our personalities, and we shouldn't be. If you look at this, you look at the greatest franchises that have ever existed, or the greatest Olympic teams or athletes. You know, you don't have Olympic athletes like Michael Phelps when he won all the awards that he did, right? Or Simone when she had all the awards that she had, or, you know, track athletes like Carl Lewis or any of these people at all, Mark Spitz, okay? And them going to practice after they've won their 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th medal and saying, I'm good enough now, I'm done. No, they say, I need to get stronger, I need to get faster, I need to get better, I need to improve. And they are by far the best in the world, proven over and over again. Most of us, we haven't even finished like 8th grade level swimming or gymnastics or football or whatever the example is, but we're patting ourselves on the back like we're a retired all-pro. No, if these athletes need to continue to see how they can get better according to what it is they're doing, the main thing we're developing in our life is our personality, and we can never stop working on optimizing and making it better. That's super important for you to know. So these are 20 things that might surprise you about your personality, but you've got control of them if you actually just take control.